All right, let's start. Hi, everybody, and a warm welcome again to all of you to this webinar session. The topic for today's session is multi-site solar rollouts and how to master these. My name is Ellen Ekblom, and I'm Head of Customer Success here at Alight. Allight is a pure play solar PPA expert with operational presence across Europe. We were founded back in 2013 in the Nordic market, and to date we have completed more than 40 solar PPA projects. We finance our projects with long-term green capital, and actually on the right-hand side in this presentation you see what was our very first solar project commissioned in 2015 for a customer in the insurance sector. And as you can see, this is a rooftop project, and that's also the focus of today's webinar session. So today we'll focus on what we call on-site solar. So solar consumed behind the meter, where the panels are placed either on the roof of the building or, for example, at a nearby carport or such. And today you will have the opportunity to learn from some real experts in this area. Our CEO, Harald Överholm, will start off with a discussion with Pete Rive, who is the founder of SolarCity, one of the largest solar PPA firms in the US. After that, you will hear a discussion with Christopher Salmén. Christopher is an asset manager at the pension provider Allight and has been responsible for driving their solar program where rooftop solar was implemented across the real estate portfolio. So before I hand over to Harald, I just want to encourage all of you to ask your questions throughout this session, and to do that you can use the Q&A function in this Zoom application. So take the opportunity, ask your questions, and we will do our very best to answer all of them. That's it for me. Now over to you, Harald.
Thank you so much. And great to be here and great to see so many attendants. Looking forward to share some insights. Let's see if I can share my screen here too. That would be. All right, there we go. So I wanted to just start out the webinar by remembering why this is important, why it's solar important, and really, to me at least, it goes all the way back to just the insight that solar is increasingly one of the key responses that we have to climate change. And what is making solar so important in that regard? Well, first of all, obviously it's clean. Second of all, it's modular, so it's something that fits in all sizes, in all shapes, and can be deployed at scale. But thirdly, I think perhaps most importantly for the growth is that since last year, on an average globally, solar is the cheapest way to produce electricity of all technologies that we have. And people are noticing that increasingly. So I just love this chart and I'd like to share it. This is the new deployment of electricity generation last year, 2019. And solar was by far the largest energy technology that was used globally or deployed as new last year. And this has led even conservative estimates to believe that solar is on the path to be the largest way to produce electricity globally within, if it's 20 years, if it's 30 years, well, I mean, who knows? Historically, the forecasters have always been seriously wrong about the pace of solar deployment. So judging by that, most likely solar is going to be the largest way to produce electricity within the next 20 to 30 years. But what's interesting about these numbers is not just how large they are, it's also that something new is happening in the way that we build out electricity. Historically, new electricity generation was built by centralized means, so governments and state utilities. But for solar, that's not true. So most of this solar deployment is happening because large power users make decisions about buying solar. So you just have this page of all these logos of companies that have made conscious decisions to buy new solar through PPA business models or other business models, but just make sure that through their purchasing decisions, they make new solar come live. So this is something new. I mean, this is truly the core of what it means to have an energy revolution or a decentralized revolution. And that's ultimately why we exist as a company and why we have this webinar today. When you look at the on-site, so solar deployed on buildings, I think an amazing piece of statistics here is that about 25% of the European electricity need could be covered by the amount of solar that we could put on rooftops and on premises in Europe. So that's 25% of all power used in Europe. And where we are today in Europe, we see that about 70% of that deployment would generate savings for customers day one. So if we put solar into these places, we would create savings for customers immediately. Yet that's not happening yet. I mean, what's the percentage of electricity produced in Europe by on-site solar? Well, it's probably less than 1%. It's solar in total is about 2.5%, 3%. And why is that? Why has on-site so much potential left to give? Well, I mean, coming from the market myself and just reflecting on what I see every day, it's largely because of the complexity and the feeling of customers and people who use premises that there's so much to figure out in order to put solar on the roof. And that's why we have the webinar today. We'd like to challenge that because we think that you can, through business models and through serious thinking around how to share risk in the right way, you can come a long way to make this a super simple decision for customers. So on that note, I'd like to move over to our guests, and the first guest today being Pete Rive. Pete Rive is one of the founders of SolarCity, which is now Tesla Energy, the absolute pioneers of solar PPAs and the first in the US market to launch that. So, hi, Pete.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Cool.
I can see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And we've had a lot of contact over the years here, but actually that was we set that up kind of pre-COVID, so we haven't been using video. So it's probably the first time I'm seeing you as I'm talking to you.
Yeah, we should do it more often.
Exactly. So maybe we're going to start by just giving a brief introduction to yourself and to SolarCity, which is now Tesla Energy.
Okay, yeah. So SolarCity was founded in 2006. It was founded by my brother and I, and we just wanted to create a business that would tackle any obstacles that people had to adopting solar. By the time it got integrated into Tesla, it was close to around 300,000 customers, and by several orders of magnitude, one of the largest solar providers in the country, if not the world. And I think that the biggest reason that we were successful is we quickly realized that solar itself is inherently a financeable product, right? It's something that has some amount of capital cost, and then it generates either savings for the customer or it generates some amount of cash flow stream for an investor. And we combined that with the fact that one of the biggest obstacles that customers had for getting into solar was the upfront cost. And so we thought, okay, well, is there a way that we can basically have them treat their solar energy bill in the same way that they do their utility bill? Okay. And then, what was great is that we were able to, through our scale, get our costs to the point that customers could acquire solar energy for a rate that was often cheaper than what they were paying from their existing electricity provider. It would also have, the massive benefit of being a clean source of energy, as well as being a very predictable cost of energy. So, yeah, so that's the background, a quick background on SolarCity. We didn't ever operate internationally unless you count Canada and Mexico, but the North American market was just so big that we stayed focused there. And at the time that we were founding SolarCity, when we looked at the European market, most of the solar adoption was driven by the feed-in tariff subsidy. And I think, in conversations with you over the past couple of years, it looks like, Europe's on the cusp of a transition towards a more subsidy-free mode of adoption for solar, where it is just, fundamentally, cheaper to buy solar just based on the fact that it is actually a, lower cost of energy than something like coal or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. And that's, I think one of the benefits of the US market was that it started out having to think about customers as the drivers for solar energy from the start. Whereas in Europe, we had this other start, which was very, very strictly subsidy driven, but that's now changing rapidly. And that's the transition we, as an industry, we have to go through. So maybe if you wanna, because you had two businesses, you had a residential business and then you had a commercial and industrial, which is a corporate power buying business. If you wanna elaborate a little bit on the commercial and industrial side, what were the drivers, except for, was it just day one savings, or were there other drivers as well for corporates to do this?
Well, I mean, I think that, like what we found is that the motivation starts with wanting to do the right thing. Like it typically starts with somebody going, okay, well, is there a different place that we could source our energy that would be cleaner? But we did find that even though that was the initial motivation, ultimately the customers needed to be comfortable with the fact that it had economic benefits as well. And it was not always easy, just given the cost of solar, given the cost of financing, to be able to show a customer, savings day one. But we could always get very close to the electric bill that they currently had and offer them the additional benefit of predictability. Energy markets can be volatile, and to be able to lock in a relatively low energy price for a decade or two was very compelling. So we saw a lot of success taking PPAs to commercial customers, and we had a lot of them that had multiple sites, like Intel, Walmart, Whole Foods, Amazon, like a lot of these types of brand names, as well as many that perhaps people haven't heard about, adopted solar power through us. And it was really because at the end of the day, like the customer looks at the options that they have, and they understand that the relationship that they have with the utility is basically indefinite. You know what I mean? And it's and they're paying some amount of monthly bill to the utility, and then with us, it's a very similar relationship, right? The difference is that they're basically just sourcing the energy from their rooftops. It's risk-free in that if the energy system wasn't performing, then they're just not paying. So, I think that the way that PPAs can be structured is that, you just make it kind of a no-brainer for the customer. What was key for us is to get it to the position where, there was just no good reason why somebody wouldn't want to do it.
And that makes me think also, maybe we have some, I'm sure we have some attendees who haven't heard of PPAs. Maybe we should just take a minute to, let's define what a PPA is.
Sure.
If you want to give it your best.
Well, I mean, it's the acronym is Power Purchase Agreement. Actually, it should be called an Energy Purchase Agreement because you're buying the energy, not the power. But let's forget about that. That's a little nuanced. But the idea is that you just buy the energy, the kilowatt hours from the solar system on your roof in the exact same way that you would buy kilowatt hours from a utility. So it's a very familiar paradigm to the customer. They get an energy bill, maybe there's some fixed charges, but then there's an energy component, and it works exactly like that. On a regular basis, you get an energy bill, and it tells you exactly how much energy you're being billed for, and that it was sourced from your roof. So I think that the one thing though that is important to understand though is that for a company to recoup its costs in the investment of the solar, for a company like SolarCity or for you guys to be able to recoup its costs, you do need to be able to have a contract length that is financeable. So that's why in PPAs you'll typically find contract terms that are in excess of 10 years, very often 20, depending on the nature of the actual installation and customer. And that's just because that's the only way that you can actually provide this offering, right? Like you need to be like the developer needs to be able to go and secure financing off of some amount of known future cash flows. So, but the short answer is it's basically a contract to buy energy off your roof for a long period of time, typically 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and you're saying that your whole mission was to make that a no-brainer, and meaning that you want to make sure that they're just paying for the power that's produced, and all of that power is just always generating a savings. So essentially, they're not paying anything unless the savings generated. So I would qualify as a no-brainer too.
Yeah. I mean, like there's always like, there's a risk in the very short term that maybe some weird volatility creates lower energy costs. But if you pan out a little bit and you look at energy costs over a longer period of time, as one should when you engage in a call 20-year contract, you'll find that energy costs generally do increase. So yeah, I mean, like that was definitely something that like we had to talk to customers about, is just get them comfortable, because like often they didn't really think about long-term energy costs that much, right? It was just kind of like happened. It was just part of infrastructure. But part of the solar purchasing process with the PPA is that they must think about, okay, well, what do they think that are going to happen to electricity prices over the next 20 years?
And I guess that's why one of the challenges that we see for deployment in the market is obviously, just like you're saying, this might be a lot of times the first time that a customer has to think in a structured way about the energy supply, and in particular what it means to replace the utility bill with solar, etc. So how would you approach situations like that when you meet the new customer and the customer says, look, this is really interesting, but I know very little about it. How can I come to a level of comfort in rolling this out? Do I have to, how much analysis do I have to do myself in terms of learning the technology or learning how my rooftops work, etc. And how much should I just trust the market to tell me that?
Well, I think the first thing you should do is just understand what your risks are, right? What your true financial risks are. Because you don't have a financial risk for the performance of the solar system, right? If you don't have to worry about the technology, the developer, if you trust the developer will select the correct technology. They're actually, with their financing partner, is going to be owning it. And if it doesn't perform, you don't pay. So, there's not much of a technology risk that the customer has to take. So then it just becomes, getting comfortable with the fact that they're going to be in the building for a long time. And getting comfortable with the fact that this electricity price is fixed for a long period of time relative to a market that is somewhat volatile. So but there it really comes down to you'll find that risk is really on the fringes. It's so, like if say you have a solar PPA, just hypothetically, at 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and then current energy prices are 6 cents a kilowatt hour, and then they say dip briefly below 5 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. There's just like a little bit of exposure for like a year or two over a 20-year period that really isn't that big of a deal, especially relative to the sustainability and leadership posture that the company can take as a result of adopting solar, right? I mean, like it's just like there's so much more to gain, and there's so much more at stake relative to like the risk that is inherent in like the very, very small fractions of pennies of a kilowatt hour that is the downside risk of adopting a solar PPA.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense, but then I think sometimes for customers who are very new to the area, it's more a sense of the feeling that there are unknown unknowns. You're not really sure if you have figured out everything that you need to figure out, basically. But what I think is intriguing, talking to you a lot of times about how your market developed, was that it came to a point where some customers would do this on on a repeatable level. So they would actually look at portfolios of rooftops without even having gone down into the details at all of the individual site. And they would still find ways to rapidly deploy or have companies like SolarCity and yourself deploy solar assets on these multiple rooftops. So that really seems to be, I mean, if you compare it to where we are in the market, where it might take a long time to find the comfort with one rooftop, it really seems like a step change to come to a point where you can do this for multiple rooftops. But maybe you want to elaborate on how you got there as a market.
Yeah, I mean, we would like, the thing is that if a customer with multiple sites came to us, we could always figure out a way to do something a little bit more custom and to figure out ways to lower our costs, right? If you have a certainty of, say, 50 sites, then you can start a different type of procurement cycle. You can negotiate very specific financing terms. So I think that what you find is that the solar company is in a better position to be able to provide customers with a better price if there are multiple sites. It just like, there's so many benefits logistically and economically for the solar provider that those benefits end up coming through directly to the customer. And then also, I mean, I think that there's so much legal and sometimes administrative overhead with contracts like these. And so if you could incur that one time for 50 sites, I think there's just economies of scale there.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a big part of the way that we got solar adopted across multiple sites.
And did these customers, like, I think at some point you told me, look, for some of these for some of these procurements, you were just given the GPS coordinates of a building and basically nothing more, and you were asked by the customer to give them a proposal. Is that, can you confirm or deny that anecdote?
Yeah, no, definitely, because like there would just be, all that really mattered to them was in that location, what were they paying for energy and what were we going to be selling the energy for? If the solar system itself, was 500 kilowatts or 300 kilowatts, that didn't make as much of a difference contractually, because, they knew that we wanted to try to put as much solar as we could. But contractually, it was just tied to the amount of energy that was being produced. So if we were a smaller system, there was no big financial penalty. Bigger system, they were getting an additional benefit. So yeah, that was the best way to kind of get the rollout started. Like the alternative, which is that before you can get the contract, you've got to complete the full system design on every single system. It's just prohibitively expensive. It's just not something that is feasible to do unless you're charging a higher PPA rate.
Yeah, I mean, the question is if it's something that the customer should have been looking at themselves or not. And I mean, a lot of times we find ourselves, I guess, telling customers that, look, you don't have to have an opinion about the technical design of this asset, because that's something we will do ourselves anyway, and then we'll present it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in terms of if you were advising your customer today who's looking at this on a European level, a lot of customers are asking us, who do we think that they need in terms of a consultant or help on their side in order to buy PPAs? What did you see in the US market? What did the customers typically need in terms of help to buy PPAs?
Well, I mean, I think that the first thing they needed is they needed to be able to get a good understanding as to what the energy costs were. And so, but most of the time they could just do that from looking at their energy bills. So if the company was large enough, they had somebody in the organization who was responsible for, managing energy bills. Typically, infrastructure, utilities area. And it was very rare that they needed to bring in a solar expert. Once they begin to appreciate the risk-free nature of a PPA contract, it really just became a matter of, energy procurement, and then understanding that the bill would arrive in the same way that the utility bill does. And they didn't have to think about it much more than that.
So basically, there were a few kinds of consultants that you would see across situations.
Yeah.
Potentially on the legal side, I don't know, to look at the PPAs, was that something that customers were needed a lot of help with?
Yeah, I mean, like there would definitely be with these large companies, there would be in-house lawyers that would be reviewing the PPA contract. We try to set up the contract so that it was standardized and simple. We actually worked with industry groups to try to standardize on contract terms, so that it wouldn't be confusing to the customer. I think that would be good for maybe something similar to be happening in Europe. Because the last thing you want is that all the different participants are reviewing all these different and unusual PPA contracts. Like, to the degree that the contract can be made simple and standardized, I think will benefit the customer and reduce legal costs.
Yeah. So to summarize, if you would, so this is happening now in Europe. It's something that's I think is widely discussed. A lot of corporates are looking at it, but fairly few success cases still. And when you look at the US market, it's still growing. But it's becoming a very mature market. What would be to summarize, what would be your advice to European corporates looking at this today?
Well, I would if you have multiple sites, I would get going on these sites. Like, solar has never been more affordable. I think the time is now to act. I would encourage them not to overthink things on the technology or engineering side, and focus primarily on it being a source of energy, and comparing that to the source of energy that you're currently procuring.
So focus on the energy, focus on the savings, and see how much you can get done in one go, basically.
Yeah, savings. There's also a big predictability component as well. To know what your energy costs will be is also a massive benefit.
Great. Thank you so much, Pete. It's been
you're welcome.
A pleasure having you here. And
Definitely.
I look forward to having many more conversations with you about this, because that's how we're learning how to push this market forward. So
definitely.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to having a conversation with someone who's been a customer, someone who's been involved in making decisions to buy multiple solar for multiple rooftops. So let me welcome Christopher Salmén, and you're the manager of the retail portfolio of Alecta Real Estate, Alecta being the largest pension provider in Sweden. Did I get that correct?
Thank you very much, Harald, and great to be here, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to listen to your great conversation here with Pete. So, and thank you. Yes. So Alecta is Sweden's largest pension fund. We manage 1,100 billion SEK. We're an occupational pension fund, so we manage pension plans for 2.6 million Swedish people and 35,000 companies.
A lot of companies and a lot of people.
Yes, and it's a great responsibility, and that's why this is also very high on our focus, to work on sustainability and to work with actions that actually can be seen.
And you launched the solar rooftop strategy in about 2 years ago, I think, that you were the architect of. And that this number of rooftops is now done, and this is something you're going to move on to expand. So maybe you want to start by telling us a little bit of how you got into that and how the road to that strategy looked like.
Yeah. First of all, sustainability is a high focus for us. We are one of the biggest buyers of green bonds. And we have set out a target that our total investment portfolio would be CO2 neutral to 2030. And by doing so, we seek for many different ways to implement concrete actions and actually communicate it out to people. And working with rooftop solar panels and the collaboration that we had with you has actually really created something for us that we, in a very easy way, from a marketing perspective, also to be fair, in a very easy way can communicate it out both for people that visit or pass by our locations.
It's such a visible and clear and tangible thing.
Yeah.
And you early on you picked the power purchase agreement model that Pete was mentioning as your way of rolling this out. I mean, you could have you looked at multiple models. You could have picked any of these models. Do you want to elaborate on what your thinking was in that sense?
Yeah, I could say one interesting focus for us is that the actual demands on return that you put on your investment is actually lower than for us in many of our real estates, meaning that with a focus that the electricity price that we actually box in with you, so to say, is on the same level or lower than in the agreements that we have today. That means that you help us drive property value. So we're both in this from a sustainability perspective, but we're very much into this for return.
It goes all the way back to what Pete was saying about the no-brainer in terms of when you know that there's a saving per kilowatt hour, then and you're paying per kilowatt hour.
Yeah,
that becomes a simple decision, I guess.
Yeah, precisely. And for us to pick the PPA setup or agreement was really for us to have our team to really get the know-how and the connections to set up a structured way to roll it out. That starting phase was quite long, and also to have a continuous focus on operating and securing the delivery of these systems if we would invest in them by ourselves. That would, so to say, go away from our core focus. So for us, it was really a way of ease and a way of return and a way of creating sustainability actions with a high marketing impact.
And just in terms of practical, I mean, how you actually went about to roll this out. To start with, it was you yourself and a few other people in your organization who got involved in this. Did you have a need for outside external consultants to roll this out or to make the decisions?
Yeah, of course. I'm one of three investment managers for our direct and indirect portfolio in the Nordics or in Sweden, and we are a very, so to say, slimmed team. So for us to actually, with our outsourced property management, to have a focus to analyze and estimate the possibility to roll a plan like this out, we needed partners, and that's why we found you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm happy we could help. So we helped you a bit to understand the opportunity, and then we helped you to deliver the actual PPAs and the rooftop assets. And now, I mean, looking back at that process, because I mean, one of the key themes I think here that we want to help everyone else understand is, how simple can you make this as a customer? Do you think you could have made your process even simpler? You would go back and advise yourself back then? Would you have made something simpler?
We can always learn. That's what we're here for. I would say one thing is really to be aware of your technical standards of your buildings. In Sweden, rooftop quality has actually been a question mark, and many municipality has increased the need for how much weight the roofs should be able to bear. So that would be something to be on top of the criteria that the municipalities in your location actually demands on your buildings. Then I think one good thing that we did was that we went for, I'll say, we went for buildings where we focused on the property electricities. We didn't go within agreements with the tenants. That made it easier. We didn't went with buildings where we actually had so to say, where we didn't agree in the organization. So we focused on getting so to say the easy picks done to show small pieces of success. So
yeah, I think that was a good, I mean, if I remember it correctly, the strategy that you had was to really, you know, looking at your whole portfolio, you went for the easiest ones in terms of, as you're saying now, in terms of contractually where you were in charge of the electricity and there wasn't too many other stakeholders, but then also you went for the ones where you simply saw the largest possible saving happening up front, so that it would become a financial success, as it were.
Precisely. Yeah, we wanted this to be a success, so we went for actually the clear opportunities.
And I mean, I think that's a very good starting point for strategy, to just make it goes back to the no-brainer thinking. Just make sure it's something that clearly looks like a success from day one. And if you would advise other companies, it might be real estate owners, or it might be other kinds of companies with a collection of sites and considering multiple rooftops, what would be your top advice to them today?
I would say to start off from so to say a high perspective, looking upon what investment model that you actually would prefer, and looking upon the opportunity of scale. So if you want to create something, don't only focus on one single building, focus on your whole portfolio, and be selective from that perspective on what are the easy picks, and join in the organization that you actually agree upon at least those ones, and also focus on your property electricity. So don't go into long tricky negotiations with your tenants that have usually shorter lease terms than the terms that we in a sort of say PPA agreement would go into.
Yeah, I mean, maybe those tricky situations can be done in the next wave, or when you get comfortable with the first wave.
Precisely.
What about internally, when you did this? Were there challenges in your own organization to this program?
Of course, there's always the discussion on what is better or what is worse.
I don't think we have any attendees from Elekta right now, so you can speak freely.
Okay, thank you. No, but it's really we focused on where we actually could match the existing electricity bill, and we had some buildings that we actually where we could make a larger sort of marketing effect, but on those buildings the installation would be much more tricky, and there we really had long discussions to do it or not, and we will see in the future, but that wasn't the way.
That did not end up becoming the easy situations, and that was partly because there was an internal challenge from asset management people, etc.
Precisely.
How did you find the legal side of things? So it's a PPA, it's a contract, ultimately it's a long contract. Was that a challenge for you to work with a legal contract?
Yeah, for us, especially who we are, to do things right and to measure and estimate risk is of highest importance. So before we even started, we worked a lot together with our lawyers to be very clear and clear on the legal structuring and how we estimate risk. So I think that's a very good focus to bring and an advice for everyone to make that homework from very early on.
Obviously, once you've done it one time, it's going to be the same PPA that you keep signing. So like,
yeah,
or at least like Pete was saying, you know, if you can standardize that and make sure that you sign something that's very similar from one situation to the next, then
yeah.
it's only the first step that's difficult.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
So I mean, just to summarize, I mean, I feel like you were kind of reflecting what Pete was saying in terms of like, make this a no-brainer. That's how you make things happen, when you focus on the situations that can be a no-brainer from a financial point of view and also from a simplicity point of view. And then
precisely, and also I would say to set up a structure but be open for change, because just during these couple of years that we lived with this strategy, we've seen legislation changes, we've seen changes in local legislation due to the buildings and so on. So things change.
Yeah.
So be open for change.
And it's the intersection between real estate and energy law and financial law. So I mean, it's a constantly changing area.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us. So Christopher Sundgren, the head of retail at Alecta Real Estate, sharing your views on how to roll out framework of rooftops. Great, thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Ellen to wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harald and Christopher. What I just wanted to say was a big thank you to all of you for this very interesting and engaging discussions. I hope that all of you who listened in found this useful and that you got some hands-on advice for how to roll out solar on your own sites. This was the last webinar session from Allight this year, but we will be back next year with new speakers and new topics. And of course, yeah, this session has also been recorded, so we will send out the recording and the presented material, so you will get that. All right, I think that's all from us this time. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye.